We opened it up for public comment. April 2016, there were 2 hearings in public hearings on this topic, on this regulation. At the April board meeting, we again modified it and made 15-day comment. June 2016, there were some policy decisions that were made, and we instructed staff to modify the language. July 2016, we opened again for a 15-day comment, and September 2016, we opened it up for an additional 15-day comment. So now we've got this the third 15-day comment period ended on October 14th. So now we have the regulation back in front of us. So draft 1 contains the modified text as approved by the board at the last board meeting in September. And that's labeled September 22nd, 2016. Draft 2 is a clean version to enable us to review it in a much cleaner format. And it does not contain all the strikeouts. So today, we can review the third 15-day comment period input that we received, and the staff recommendation is to adopt the regulatory language and delegate to the executive officer that normal language that we have about the authority to make technical or non-substantive changes.
I would make a motion we do exactly that.
Second. Okay. Everyone's reviewed the public comments. I think most of them were in agreement, are just going to be rejected per the staff recommendations.
Right. Well, and it seems like most of the public comments are reiterations of things we've gone through before and thoroughly.
Right.
Okay. So we have a motion and a second. Okay. Any board comments before we open it up to public comment? Okay. Public comment on the prescription drug take-back regulations. You want to come up, please? If you can speak into the microphone so we can all hear you. Good morning.
Good morning. Before I begin on this topic, I just want to say that I want to congratulate the pharmacists you've honored today. I am someone who takes a tremendous amount of medication on a daily basis. My local pharmacist has helped me tremendously in managing that medication, managing my insurance, managing my doctors. And so I want to thank them for their service. My name is Andrea Ventura. I'm here on behalf of Clean Water Action. Clean Water Action represents 50,000 Californians who are our members and who have overwhelmingly supported drug take-back with the pharmaceutical manufacturing community taking responsibility for implementing those programs, extended producer responsibility. And while I appreciate, I have sent in written comments numerous times on behalf of our members. We have seen changes as a result of that in the proposed regulation. We remain somewhat frustrated by what's before us today. And these may not seem like major concerns to you, but they are to us and our members. So let me be clear, first of all, that we absolutely prioritize the need to be safe, to be secure in these programs. Okay? That's why for many years, while we were concerned about the effects of unused pharmaceuticals in our homes, and I have boxes of them in my home, getting into the hands of those who would abuse them or getting into our waterways, where scientists are telling us what we don't know is what the long-term effects of that are with these trace amounts of cocktails in our drinking water. While we have been concerned about that for a very long time and want to see this step of taking back these products in a way that ensures they don't get into the wrong hands or into the environment, we waited for a long time working with public agencies, including the DEA, to move forward to ensure that these programs are secure and safe. So let me stress that. But we are frustrated by the repeated comment that our comments that the DEA has addressed this issue thoroughly, and that some of the specifications that you're putting into these regulations are actually creating additional barriers. We're frustrated that that comment gets rejected over and over again, and we're not the only ones making it, that because the board's regulation mirrors the DEA's regulations with a few minor differences, and that these differences don't conflict with the DEA or mean that that the board's regulations would not be compliant with the DEA. That statement shows that the staffer who is making that recommendation has not heard what the public interest community, what local jurisdictions who have passed ordinances, what other regulators have consistently since January been telling you, that it's not a matter that the regulations wouldn't comply with the DEA, it's that they're getting in the way of programs that have been passed by elected officials that ensure that we can move forward with these take-back programs. Now, some of these things you've addressed, the physical barrier or walls around the kiosks, we appreciate you hearing us on that. It was not viable. And a few other aspects of that. What I'm here to say today is that we still feel that these regulations, the process being slow, we do want you to move forward. The process being slow has, whether intentionally or not intentionally, helped delay implementation of local ordinances that gets these drugs off the street and out of our environment, okay? Moving forward is a good thing, but we continue to oppose, and most of the comments you have received over and over again, we're repeating ourselves not because we just want to hear ourselves talk, but because these are important points, of telling us that a pharmacist can use their professional judgment to conclude that they can't comply with DEA regulations is a problem. And the reason is this. First of all, most of the ordinances do not require pharmacies to host kiosks, okay? The two that do have an out. If a pharmacist says, I can't, they tell the pharmacist, you have to comply with the DEA regulations. If the pharmacist does not feel that they can do that, they can go to those jurisdictions and explain why. By making a blanket statement like this, it puts no responsibility on that pharmacist to not comply with the local ordinance. It just allows them to say, you know, I don't really want to do this. Okay? Now, we have never advocated that these programs should be required by pharmacies. We want to encourage pharmacies because that's where our members want to bring back their drugs. But the point is that what my members are perceiving is that what you're actually saying, maybe not intentionally, but what you're actually saying is, we'll allow you to do these programs, but wink, wink, you don't have to. It's a discouragement, and it's causing confusion by pharmacists that are wanting to do these programs but are unsure what it is you're actually asking them to do. They understand the DEA regulations. They don't want further barriers or confusion.
Before you go on, there's no wink, wink.
Yeah,
That's insulting to the board.
What I'm telling you, sir, what I am telling
I'm telling you.
What I'm telling you, sir, is that that is the perception.
That is an incorrect perception, and for you to bring it up here is unnecessary.
I also said that if that may not be intentional, but what is happening is that Big Pharma is coming to the table and telling local jurisdictions we can't move forward because we don't know what the board is saying. We are hearing pharmacists say we are confused. What is the difference between what the Board of Pharmacy is doing and what the DEA is requiring us? And what is happening is that is helping the pharmaceutical industry, the manufacturers, not the pharmacists, who are trying to oppose these. Okay? So what I am saying is that what we have consistently said to this board is tell your pharmacists we need to comply with DEA regulations, keep these programs safe, and that if you comply with the DEA regulations, you can move forward. Do not add extra barriers. This is one of the few cases where the state of California does not have to add to the cumbersomeness. It's a narrow view of how we are protecting the public, and we want these programs to move forward. Did you have a question?
Actually, this board governs the practice of pharmacy in our state. And I agree with Dr. Shad. There is no wink, wink on any of our regulations. They're very clear. And none of our regulations have any wiggle room in them. This is the way it is. So we are all on the same page. We want to move this forward. I've heard 2 board members already motion and second. This is a way for the pharmacies in our state to know how to interpret some of the DEA regulations so it's safe practice for our consumers and our patients.
What we're hearing from pharmacists who have participated in stakeholder programs as these ordinances are being passed is they're confused by this. They understand the DEA rules. They understand what the bins have to do. They understand the requirements for safety. They understand the kinds of drugs. By the way, we are concerned with both over-the-counter and prescription drugs. I understand that your focus is prescription. They understand many of the rules, but some of these rules they are completely confused with what this board is coming out with, and they feel that they've got it, they understand it, and what they really would like to see is, and certainly our members would like to see, is comply with federal law. We're covered, we're safe, and we want this to move forward now.
There's a lot of instances where there is federal law and there also is state law. I mean, the DEA,
yes, I know, I work on that very
has
often.
a number of regulations on controlled substances. We have also state regulations. So there's a lot of areas where this occurs. Maybe what we can do, and I don't know, turning to Ginny, is could we develop some guidance if there's certain specific areas, an FAQ document or something kind of like what we've done with sterile compounding, if there are questions that come up from
Absolutely, and in
locations.
fact, this is a major reg for us and for the public. And so we probably do need to provide some additional guidance insofar as it'll help implement. But the DEA regs actually say voluntary themselves.
Yeah, we've
which
never
is far
said it
broader,
shouldn't be. We've never said that.
Which is, we understand that. But in some cases, a cornerstone of our practice is the pharmacist. Anyone can own a pharmacy. Only a pharmacist can be responsible for the operations of the pharmacy. And we hold that individual very responsible for things. A lot of our disciplinary actions involve the pharmacist in charge who is held accountable for things, to the point that it's frustrating, I think, to the profession sometimes that this is occurring. But for us to basically allow a pharmacy to just do whatever without holding that PIC responsible is a problem for public safety. And thus, we really want that PIC to be responsible for either being all in if you're doing a collection receptacle. The mail order or the mail back is one thing, but the collection receptacle presents problems for a lot of reasons. And if you've got too small a pharmacy, if you're in a very dangerous area, if you've got some other reason, we think that the PIC should be empowered to do it, and that is commensurate with a voluntary program to a degree.
But the law requires that. And allows for that even in the two ordinances. And again, we didn't advocate that pharmacies were required in Santa Cruz, for instance, to participate. But even in that case where they did make that mandatory, there is an out. If a pharmacist comes in and says, look, where would you want me to do this where I can comply with the law? And then the county, then they get a pass.
Well, then that's consistent with what our reg says, because that PIC needs to go to the county, make the local officials aware of his or her objections to running a collection bin and why it's unsafe for public to have one of these collection bins in that pharmacy, and that's appeasing both us and the local jurisdiction.
I would still say that this serves, perhaps unintentionally, but it serves to discourage pharmacists from participating.
I hope not, because
I hope not too, but that's what we're hearing.
Can I suggest that during this public comment period, it may not be worthwhile to have extended back and forth with each comment?
Yes.
Fair enough.
Do you have any other comments?
The only other comment I want to make is that we have a continued concern about the issue of the preloaded self-injection types of medications, like the EpiPens. These are a major source of a problem because, unlike other medications, there is an expectation and even a hope that they are never used and they become, unusable after a while. While we understand this consideration of safety, I deal with water professionals that are getting stuck online with sharps. So we need to make sure that those things that can still contain medication that is still getting into the environment should be allowed to be collected if they're in their original packaging where it's puncture proof, okay? Because we do believe that is allowable under the health and safety code. We have seen a lot of the ordinances that, are asking for that to be collected, and we continue to hope that the board would reconsider exempting them from these programs.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Any other public comment on this regulation?
Hello, good morning.
Good morning.
Afternoon. My name is Aileen Leung. I work with the City and County of San Francisco. I just want to thank you all for all of your hard work on this issue. I know it's been a long journey, and you've all been really great on considering all the comments, and I know it's a lot to consider. There's one comment that I wanted to make, and it's regarding the Sharps exclusion to the regulations. We are requesting that you add an exemption to this exclusion to allow unused, still in its original packaging, preloaded self-injector devices, and have that be allowed to be put into the receptacle. We don't believe there is a public safety issue. We don't believe it's would be harmful to the pharmacist. These products are designed to be carried around in your purse, in your backpack, in your pocket for quick use. And if it's still in its original packaging, there should be no problem with that. To my knowledge, there's no other regulation that prohibits the commingling of these items into a receptacle meant for pharmaceuticals. And I noticed in your response to the comments, your staff mentions the section on business and professions code. And I took a quick look at it, and by no means I'm not a lawyer, obviously. And this section is titled hypodermic needles and syringes. And to me, and the whole section talks about who's able to sell needles and syringes to the public and how exchange programs are run. And I don't believe that auto injectors would necessarily fall under this line item under this section. So I'm asking that you take another look at that. And the last thing I'm going to say is there are overall larger implications of adding this, of not putting an exclusion to this. There's implications on how programs are designed and run. If there is no exemption for unused auto injectors that are still in its original packaging, that means that these products need to be collected separately from a collection receptacle, even though it's still going for incineration. And I know there was an email from Allison Dabney from the Department of Public Health that was brought up that said that these products should ultimately go for incineration and not for autoclaving, which is generally what is happening with sharps and syringes with no pharmaceuticals in them. And there's also implications on how city and county folks, what they tell the public. I get calls from the public all the time asking, how do I dispose of these EpiPens, these auto injectors that I have never used before? It's not going to poke anybody. And if there is no exemption in these regulations, that means I would have to tell people to go grab a Sharps container because it wouldn't be allowed to be put into the receptacle. So thank you all. That's just my 2 cents.
Thank you. Laura, do you have any on this issue about the Sharps and the EpiPens and such? Can you give us some insight?
So the EpiPen isn't described, and I don't know if there's a technical term for that type of device, but what the board does have a law that says, and this is section 4146 of the BMP, Business and Professions Code, a pharmacy may accept the return of needles and syringes from the public if contained in a Sharps container as defined in section 117,750 of the Health and Safety Code. So that description, I'm assuming that the EpiPens contain, that they are Sharps, but they specifically require that you use a Sharps container. And that health and safety code provision that's referenced there and the descriptions that I found of what a Sharps container is one that has very definitive, it's a rigid and puncture resistant, I think, container that is different than what is required for
With
the
the liners.
liners of the take-back
So
regulations.
this would, in your opinion, this would mean the liners would not necessarily be a viable solution if EpiPens were disposed in them?
You would have to basically make the liner a sharps container.
But I guess the question is, and if I might have heard you incorrectly, that if an EpiPen has been used, you have to return it in the sharps container. What if that EpiPen is just expired to sell the package?
So I think that therein is a question that I haven't dealt with, and I don't know, perhaps the pharmacist on the board. I've never seen one, so I don't know. But if
Think
it's
of like a
sharp,
needle and
it's
syringe.
a sharp.
Yeah.
It is I think we've heard discussion from the public in the past that while some versions might have the needle retracted, or
Yeah.
is that
It's-
the pointy
yeah.
part,
There are
the
some that
puncturing
don't.
part is retracted,
Some that don't.
some are not.
I'm sorry. I think Ryan's asking a question that is not really a legal question. It's more of a policy question. Like, as lawyers, all we can do is interpret what the statute says, and the statute says needles and syringes. So since an EpiPen includes a needle and a syringe, we would assume that it can only be, returned by way of a sharps container. But there's obviously a policy underlying that, which is you might assume that that is meant to refer to used sharps and syringes because those are the ones that would, represent a biohazard, and ones that are in the original packaging necessarily wouldn't. But that's not, the law doesn't make that distinction clear. So as lawyers, we can only advise you that as the law is written, it's more inclusive and seems to include all needles and syringes, and saying that the only way they can be returned to a pharmacy is by way of a sharps container. So that's all we can tell you.
Because if it's in the original packaging, I mean, you'd have to, in order for this to apply, if the original packaging would be like a sharps container and provide, impenetratable.
So the
They're
original
cardboard.
package wouldn't be like a sharps container, but I don't even think that's the issue. The purpose of the policy is to protect, the public from exposure. And if something's in its original container, do you have exposure, right? If that
Yeah.
pen sticks you, no one else has used it.
Right.
And so even if that is in a plastic Ziploc bag and it sticks you, if no one has used it, the public is still safe from any, biologicals that could, get to their system.
I guess the question is, how does one determine if it's never been used? I mean,
Well,
an EpiPen
so-
is very difficult to tell if it's
So,
been.
well, no, it's not very difficult to tell. If it's in its original container unopened, that I think,
I would treat
sharps part.
everything as a potential type
Why?
of contamination, because you don't know where it's been.
well. if
You
it's-
really
if it's-
don't know.
If it's in its original container and unopened,
It's hard to. I mean, I've used EpiPens, and it's not easy to tell whether they've been opened or not.
But I think the question is, so you guys are talking about the sharps part, which I think you were referencing. The prior speaker was talking about the drug part in the EpiPen. So even if it hasn't been used, there's actually drug in there, and so now we're talking about the drug possibly getting into the water.
no, we're talking about disposal. How do you dispose of it?
But aren't the sharps incinerated
Exactly.
too, though, Debbie? I mean, is there a reason why you couldn't put that in the sharps container?
Sharps are, right now, they're largely autoclaved, which means they go under steam sterilization for, 30 minutes or so, 250 degrees, and it's not the same treatment that incineration goes for. And so we are really concerned about the active ingredients that are still in these products, and they need to be properly handled.
So they're autoclaved and they get put into landfill?
Exactly. And so I don't mean for this to go this back and forth thing. I did take a quick look at the FDA website, and they actually make a distinction between needles, syringes, lancets, auto-injectors. And while there is a larger overall term that they use to include all of these items, which are sharps, the Business and Professions Code specifically calls out needles and syringes. So it's not clear to me that auto-injectors would necessarily be lumped into these terms of needles and syringes. And, yeah.
Except, I guess, to Josh's point, there is a needle and there is a syringe.
Right.
It's just an
Got drug in
auto.
it.
And really, I'm really asking for a very specific exemption in your regulations, because without it, it really has larger implications of how these programs are run and designed and how I answer questions for the public. And really, that's my concern. I think before you've had this talk where, the public is going to do what the public is going to do. Not everybody is going to read the signs. But really, this is getting at how these programs are designed and ran and how I can legally answer questions that the public is asking me. And so I'm asking for a very specific exemption that, they're unused, still in its original packaging. And I actually had an expired EpiPen at the office that I meant to bring, and I'm shooting myself in the foot that I did not bring it. So
Are you auto-injecting yourself in the foot?
No. But anyway, thank you.
So,
Thank you.
but if we were to make this exemption, then we have to change the liner, right?
Exactly. The line, according to
So
what
it's-
Laura
yeah.
says, the liners are out, and we now got to get a rigid container to put everything in.
Unless, I think we don't know the answer to that question yet. I think we need to figure out whether you could put a sharps container containing the sharp into the liner, but I think there's this, I think there's a lot of.
But it won't fit. I don't know how you
I don't know if
did
it'll
it.
fit through the slot or not, so.
And then, if you pull the liner out and start putting things in it, that's a violation
Right.
where the DE is.
Probably there's a market for a small type of sharp plastic cover.
It seems to me that we kind of need a separate solution for EpiPens, especially given their widespread dispersion in the public, because they can't be treated like, a needle and syringe. They can't be treated like a drug. They've got special needs. Maybe, I don't know what the solution is.
And
There's
they're going way
that
up in
much
price.
concern about epinephrine. That's adrenaline. It's a common,
Amy?
I don't know.
it's a chemical we all have in our bodies. There's that much concern about epinephrine?
So I
And
would make a suggestion to the board, which is that I know this is not going to necessarily satisfy the city and county of San Francisco, but my suggestion would be that the board move forward with the regulation as written for the moment, but that we agree that we need to address this issue by way of whether it's amendment to this regulation or separate regulation, that we need to deal with these auto injectors, EpiPens or
Somehow.
others,
Yeah.
to allow for their disposal without having to jump, 7 leaps and bounds over things.
Thanks, Josh. Any other public comment?
Regarding what's going to go in those disposal bins, the prior commenter said the public is going to do what they're going to do, and they're not going to read the signs. Not only are you going to get unused auto injectors in there, you're going to get sharps too.
Yeah.
And unless someone from the pharmacy is standing there monitoring every single thing that goes into that bin, lots of stuff is going to go in there that shouldn't be in there. And remember Ramon's story about in a pharmacy in Chinatown where they actually posted a sign in Chinese that said, "Don't throw your garbage in here." So I'm just saying, and no one will know except for the incineration facility what actually ends up in those bins. So until, there's widespread use, someone eventually opens, the bag goes into an incinerator. I don't know if they throw the whole thing in there or if they open it up or what it is that they do, but I would think that incineration would kill any kind of microbe. I could be wrong about that, but gee, incineration is like 450 degrees, isn't it? I don't know. If there's any environmental people here that want to comment on that, I'd love to find out what it is, but there's going to be a lot of stuff in those bags.
Thanks, Holly.
Amy,
Yes.
on those EpiPen, those auto injector, when they come into the pharmacy, they in a package that you cannot know where you could poke yourself or poke anybody. So I think it's safe to go to those bins. If it come in the original container.
Thank you, Albert. Any other public comment?
Hello, everybody. Thomas
Good
Hare.
morning.
I'm great. How are you?
Afternoon.
I missed you guys last week.
I know, it's been a while.
It has. I'm here as a staff member of the City of Santa Rosa Water Department. And I just had a few minor clarifying questions for the board. But first, I really did want to thank you guys for interacting with us over the last year or however long it's been. You've been very gentle to me in particular. I appreciate that. And I am gonna miss you guys once this is all done.
Yeah, we still have public
You can
meetings.
still come.
You come.
We'll figure out a reason to get you back.
Perfect. On 1776.1 L, I believe, my I's and my L's look a little similar.
The last section of 1776.1.
Yeah. My clarifying question is, I just want to make sure that it's the board's intent to prohibit pharmacists or pharmacies on probation from distributing mail-back envelopes or packages. Is that the board's intent?
That's the intent.
I think that's the definition of take-back services.
Okay. And then on 1776.3B,
3G,
B as in boy,
3B as in boy.
I actually emailed Thomas Provosnik at the DEA for clarification on this point, and he confirmed that, and this is what the DEA does, you guys are allowed to make whatever decisions you want to make on this. But the DEA only required the lack of proximity to areas where emergency or urgent care is provided, and that was specific to hospitals and clinics in the DEA regulation. Now again, you guys can do as you wish with the pharmacies, but my clarifying question is, what is your intent of saying that the receptacle can't be in or near emergency areas in pharmacies? What do you mean by near? And what would that mean in a really small pharmacy where you have a door and maybe anywhere in the pharmacy would count as being near that door, which technically could be an emergency exit door, depending on what the situation was. So I just wanted to get...
That's probably an area that we can probably address with guidance, because I believe that when this was written, the emergency area was referred to the DEA's definition of emergency areas.
That's correct.
Which is areas where emergency care is provided. So that's probably something we can clarify with guidance.
Yes.
Great.
Thank you.
I just wouldn't want to add a hurdle that, there's going to be a lot for pharmacies to figure out. I wouldn't want that to be something
You're thinking it may mean that there's an emergency exit and you can't put it near there? Is that what you're concerned?
Well, some staff comment from the Board of Pharmacy had talked about emergency areas in pharmacies being, which was the first that I'd ever heard of an emergency area in a pharmacy, that maybe that meant an emergency exit door. That was surprising to me.
That'd be in the back of the pharmacy, I would
Yeah.
think, is what it would mean to most of us in the room. And you shouldn't be having the public back there, and it's the last place that you would want a collection bin.
Yeah.
Well, maybe not the last place, but certainly among the last places.
And that portion of the regulation is actually limited to hospitals and clinics with
Right,
a pharmacy on the
exactly.
premises. So we're not talking about a community pharmacy.
Correct.
We're talking
Exactly.
about
Well, in the DEA, absolutely, but in the Board of Pharmacy reg, it's talking about the part with pharmacies, I think, as well.
No, you're talking about
only-
C. It's saying
Yeah.
hospitals and clinics with a
No,
pharmacy on the
he's talking
premises.
about B.
The-
B, Josh.
Oh, okay,
Unfortunately,
sorry.
it says in B, not located in or near emergency
I see.
areas, and that's my,
I got you.
yeah.
I can see the confusion.
And then the last small point that I wanted to raise was 1776.4A with the skilled nursing facilities. And maybe this can just be some clarification that you guys could provide as well. I know that you struck part of that portion, but I was still confused. It says the pharmacy shall require skilled nursing facility employees to keep records, and it goes on. And it just isn't clear to me when that would apply. What happens if the skilled nursing facility is distributing envelopes on their own and they're not working with the pharmacy? Is there still some miraculous pharmacy that's supposed to show up and have jurisdiction over that record keeping? I just wasn't clear from what that meant exactly. But those were my minor things that I wanted to raise to the board. But thank you so much for working with us through this.
Thank you. And please, feel free to come back.
Thanks.
Any other public comment? Good afternoon, Angie.
Hi there. Good afternoon. My comments will be brief. Angie Minetti here on behalf of the California Retailers Association. Want to support the staff recommendation and also the motion that's on the table today. Understand that there's been extensive dialogue, lots of time that the board has invested in this, in speaking and engaging with various stakeholders on all ends of the spectrum here. Also, the level of review and interaction that that your staff has had with all stakeholders as well has been truly extensive. And I think that the product that we have before us today in the regulations is one that's very much respective of that dialogue, of all of the work of stakeholders involved in this space. So certainly appreciate the time and the thoughtfulness here, and would like to lend our support to this.
Thank you.
Thank you, Angie.
Any other public comment? Oh. Good afternoon, Brian.
Good afternoon, Brian Warren with the California Pharmacists Association. We also would like to support the motion, thank the board for all the work you've done. I think this is a long time coming. We're pleased to be able to implement a statewide universal take-back standard. And I would say that as an association that represents several thousand pharmacists, we have not heard about pharmacists being confused with this board's regulations.
Thank you.
We do hear about pharmacists being confused with some regulations at times, but nothing on this one. And I think I'd just like to mention that there's two concerns among pharmacists with take-back, hosting take-back receptacles. A key one of those has been the civil liability associated with doing so, and we were pleased to work with Senator Jackson this year to help address one of those concerns, or help encourage pharmacies. Another has been with some of the physical limitations associated with certain pharmacy locations, and I think that this board's regulations have addressed that potential concern. So we do thank you and look forward to hopefully encouraging pharmacists to host collection receptacles. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. Any other public comment? Okay, we have a motion on the table and we have a second. And the motion, I am assuming, Stan, since it's your motion, is going to include the executive officer language
Absolutely.
that's included in the packet?
Yes.
Okay. All those in favor, raise your hand. Okay, unanimous.
But I do think we need to keep working on the EpiPen thing.
Exactly.
I don't.
And I don't think it's just epi. I think we need to look at any, or even drugs that are dispensed in a syringe formulation.
Okay, well, I will make sure that's on the agenda for the next enforcement meeting.